So my name is Awan, like Julie mentioned. I'm the chief resident at the University of Connecticut. I'm excited to be here today to talk about, personally, one of my favorite conditions to treat is psoriasis. I think the reason dermatologists love treating psoriasis so much is because we have so many different treatment options out there, especially when you compare to where we were just 10 or 15 years ago. We can make a tremendous impact on patient lives pretty rapidly. And just out of curiosity, informally, show of hands, how many people here know someone, family, friends, acquaintances, someone who has psoriasis? Just a show of hands. So you're looking at a majority of the room for a condition that only affects about 2 to 3% of the U.S. population. I think that's something that we're seeing more and more of recently. There's a lot more awareness of psoriasis in the recent years. And you're seeing celebrities come out and talk about their battles with psoriasis. You're seeing commercials for a lot of newer medications. And as a result, we're seeing a lot more awareness from the general public. Because of that, I think we're getting more and more questions from the general public about psoriasis. So I think it's important for all of us involved in healthcare to have the basic, fundamental understanding of how psoriasis works and be able to answer those basic questions. Right. So I've got no relevant financial disclosures. I was going to introduce myself a little bit, but I did such a great job. I don't think I even went through this. I'm from the Midwest originally. I currently train out of the University of Connecticut. I was fortunate enough to train under Dr. Bruce Grover, who's our chairman. If you read some of the clinical data for the phase 3 trials and a lot of the biologics that are coming out, you're probably familiar with his name. He's one of the foremost psoriasis experts in the country. And because of his presence, we're a tertiary care referral center for psoriasis. And we tend to see more severe, more refractory disease. So we certainly have more of a skewed sample at UConn, but because of the patients that we see, we have a broad experience with a variety of different treatment modalities. So I divide today's talk into 4 basic parts. For me, it's always interesting to look back at the history of the disease and kind of trace it through different eras. The pathophysiology, to me, is the most critical part about understanding psoriasis. I think it's impossible to understand the new treatments that are coming out nowadays without an understanding of the immunology that underlies psoriasis. Clinical features are most important to me as a dermatologist. That's what I deal with on a day-to-day basis. And while I realize people are going to be going out and diagnosing and treating patients with psoriasis, I think it's helpful to have some understanding of how we approach this skin condition and how we make certain treatments. And of course, the bulk of today's treatment will be spent covering the modern day treatments. The history of psoriasis is interesting to me because if you look back, it's one of the few conditions, medical conditions that we have that you can trace back through almost every ancient civilization, dating back to the ancient Egyptians. So if you look at ancient Greek history, Galen in 280 was the first physician to introduce the term psora into the medical lexicon, the Greek term to itch. What he was actually describing was probably eczema, but he was still the first physician to try to approach skin disease and classify it based on its morphology and primary symptoms. And biblical scholars believe that the ancient biblical disease of Sahara in the book of Leviticus was probably psoriasis, misdiagnosed, misinterpreted as leprosy for many years. But our current scholars believe that it was probably psoriasis that they were approximating. And if you look throughout history, patients with psoriasis, unfortunately, were confused with people who had leprosy for most of civilization. So people with psoriasis had an enormous social stigma attached to them. They were shunned by society. They were forced to live on the outside, the outskirts of civilization. They were forced to announce their presence when approaching civilization with bells or clappers. And it wasn't until the early 1800s that physicians first separated psoriasis from leprosy. It wasn't until the mid-1800s when Dr. Von Hebra, who was the founding father of modern dermatology, who was the first person to accurately describe psoriasis as we understand it today. Psoriasis today, the rates, the prevalence vary depending on which country with statistics you look at, but it affects every corner of the globe. In the U.S., it affects about 2 to 3% of the population. It's slightly more prevalent in Caucasians, but it's a condition that affects every race, ethnicity, socioeconomic background. There is no true gender predilection. And the most interesting thing about psoriasis is that unlike most other dermatologic conditions, it can truly affect any age. So while it's most prevalent in people in their 20s and 50s, we do see babies and people quite elderly with new onset psoriasis. So it truly is a condition that does not discriminate. There's a good paper in 2003 that showed up to 40 patients with psoriasis will experience a remission at some point in their disease course. It is a chronic condition. In the clinical setting, I think it's probably the hardest thing for patients to wrap their minds around it. They're going to be stuck with this for the majority of their lives. Some of our medications are so good nowadays that patients end up with clear skin in 3 or 4 months, and it's difficult to convince them that if they come off the medication, they're very likely to experience relapses. The pathophysiology of psoriasis, like I said, is critical. Like most dermatologic conditions, it's multifactorial, so both genetics and environmental factors are involved. There's good studies. The numbers vary depending on which study you look at, but there's good studies showing that a majority of patients with psoriasis have family members somewhere along the line who also have psoriasis. There's been twin concording studies that show that monozygotic twins have a several-fold increased risk of psoriasis compared to dizygotic twins. There's been at least 9 genetic loci that have been associated with increased susceptibility to psoriasis. The most important are the genetic coding of Desmond and this HLE-CW6, which in Caucasians confers 13 times higher risk of contracting psoriasis. There's a number of environmental factors that can also trigger psoriasis. Infections are probably the most common, strep throat being the most common thing that we see clinically. HIV can make psoriasis worse, and in those patients, heart therapy can actually improve psoriasis. The isomorphic response refers to the dermatologic phenomenon where skin lesions are elicited by trauma. So you have trauma in a certain area, and skin lesions appear typically 2 to 6 weeks later. Psoriasis is one of the few conditions that displays that phenomenon. The photo on the right is showing is a patient who had an isomorphic response after that sunburn. So you can actually see where her bathing suit kind of protected her skin, but after the phototoxic effects of the sunburn, she had psoriatic lesions kind of pop up. So it's something that helps us diagnose it clinically, where the diagnosis isn't always clear. Every patient always asks me, "Doctor, did stress cause my psoriasis?" And while stress is never the only cause behind anything, there's always there's good evidence that shows psychogenic stress does exacerbate and worsen psoriasis. There's a number of medications that can also trigger psoriasis. We watch out for, like the beta blockers, hydroxychloroquine, and other anti-malarials when we're reviewing a medication list. Probably one of my biggest pet peeves, or one of the things that I always cringe at, is when I get a referral from another doctor and I see a patient with psoriasis who's on prednisone. All right. While it's a good short-term fix, and yes, it does calm down inflammatory skin condition acutely, these patients almost always get worse when they come off psoriasis, when they come off prednisone. There's long-term sequelae to prednisone use. It's just not a long-term fix. And when you consider all the other treatment modalities that we have, there's really no reason anyone at today's age should be on prednisone. So I realize I'm not going to turn anyone into a dermatologist today. There's 3 basic layers anatomically to your skin. The outermost layer is your epidermis here, the dermis below that, and then your subcutaneous fat below the dermis. And the important thing to remember is that your skin is not just a dead barrier. Right? It's an active part of your innate immune system. The most important parts of your innate immune system in terms of psoriasis are these antigen-presenting cells. Monomer cells higher up in the epidermis, and then dermal dendrocytes and plasmacytoid dendritic cells deeper down in the dermis. What these antigen-presenting cells do is they constantly interact with antigens in our external environment. And as they do so, they decide when to trigger an immune response based on the antigens that they come in contact with. Going back to basic immunology for a second. So when cyclosporin was first discovered to be effective for psoriasis, we underwent, as a medical community, a complete paradigm shift in our understanding of psoriasis. That was the first time that we realized that if cyclosporin works, psoriasis must be a T-cell mediated disease. And to be more specific, it's a helper T-cell mediated disease. So going back to basic immunology for a second, we're learning about different subsets of T-cells. Helper T-cells start out in this naive state Th0 cells, and then based on the cytokines that they're exposed to in their environment and their milieu, they differentiate down different lineages, Th1, 2, 17. Different types of helper T-cells that then secrete their own cytokines that produce very specific immune effects. There's certain cytokines in particular I want to point out here. IL-12 and IL-23 help naive T-cells differentiate down a couple of particular pathways, and then these cells themselves produce their own cytokines. We've known for decades that psoriasis is primarily a Th1 disease. That's nothing new. But in the last few years, we've realized that psoriasis is also driven to a huge extent by the Th17 pathway. And because of Th17 cytokines, like interleukin 17, that's allowed us to have potential targets for future agents. And when we cover different treatments, you see how many of our biologics are predicated based on this immunology. So it's always a constant cycle. We're presenting it somewhat linearly here, but the immune system is constantly engaging in positive feedback loops and propagating itself, which is why the immune response is so difficult to shut off. You start out with these antigen-presenting cells that activate different immune cells, produce macrophages and other types of immune cells that then come back and secrete cytokines such as TNF-alpha that further enhance antigen-presenting cells. The other thing I want to point out here is that your keratinocytes, again, are not yet inactive cells. They're very much an active part of your immune system. They're activated by the antigen-presenting cells and in response to their own set of cytokines that feed back and cause further propagation of this response. Once you get T cells down, these in psoriasis, the Th1 and Th17 pathways, Th17 in particular secretes interleukin 17, which is an important target for a number of biologics. Interleukin 17 causes keratinocyte proliferation, which explains the thickening that we see in psoriatic plaques. The keratinocytes, in addition, secrete their own chemokines, which allows them to draw T cells into the lesional psoriasis skin, as well as a number of other host factors. Keratinocytes also have an increase in a number of antimicrobial peptides, which is why you never see secondary infection of psoriasis. That's the opposite of atopic dermatitis or eczema, where we often see secondary hypertensionization because in eczema, a lot of these antimicrobial peptides are decreased, which is why we often use systemic or topical antibiotics for eczema and never for psoriasis. Right? The reason I like this pathway, this diagram, is I think it simplifies things and it shows what's clinically relevant. This is showing in a very basic fashion the Th1 and the Th17 pathways, which are two most important pathways for psoriasis. Interleukin 12 and 23, again, help differentiate naive T cells down these pathways. And why that's important is because ustekinumab, which was the LARA approved in 2009, is the only monoclonal antibody on the market that inhibits both of these interleukins. All right. Once you get Th17 cells forming interleukin 17, we have a whole host of interleukin 17 ligand inhibitors and receptor inhibitors that are currently on the market. And then before these newer biologics came on these TNF-alpha inhibitors were our first biologics approved for psoriasis with etanercept. And so I think this kind of brings home the point that, well, sometimes immunology seems esoteric and very basic. There's very real-world applications to this. We're seeing many drugs coming down the pipeline currently approved that use these basic principles. So in terms of psoriasis, most people probably have a general idea of what psoriasis looks like in the majority of patients. It tends to be pink, scaly, thickened up. Usually affects the extensor surfaces of the body, so your elbows, knees, scalp, buttocks, and back are probably your most common sites. That's your classic plaque psoriasis that I think is definitely the most common, and I think it's what most people associate with psoriasis in their minds. But there's several other forms. This is just a couple of pictures of classic plaque psoriasis, by far the most common kind that we see in our clinic. But gouty psoriasis is another subtype. It's seen usually in pediatric patients, explosive in onset. It's usually triggered by some sort of infectious agent. Strep throat being the most common. And it's named for these little raindrop-like lesions that pop up all over the trunk. Because it's typically triggered by an infection, it typically resolves on its own in 3 or 4 months. But these patients are at a higher risk of developing plaque psoriasis later in life. Erythroderma is the medical term for when 90% of your body surface area is covered by a certain condition. And so erythrodermic psoriasis, these patients are our most severe by far, and they require a slightly different approach to treatment because of their severity. Pustular psoriasis is slightly different. In my experience, it's more refractory to treatment than plaque psoriasis, especially when the pustules are on the palms and the soles. A little bit of a different treatment approach in these patients, a little bit more resistant overall to treatment. They usually cycle through 2, 3, 4 treatments. We also sometimes classify psoriasis based on what body surface areas involved. Palmoplantar psoriasis, especially in the pustular type, tends to be difficult to treat. We use a lot of phototherapy, so in a light box to calm down the inflammation in the palms and the soles. It tends to be more difficult to treat with psoriasis and other types of body. Right? Nails are often involved, so every dermatologist, when we start our initial clinical exam, we're not just looking at the skin, we're looking at the nails. You probably can't pick it up in the back. There's very subtle nail indentations here. We call nail pain. That's very characteristic of psoriasis. They yellow ABCD is caused by extravasation of leukocytes into the nail plate, and it's detached with this whitening that you're seeing is called onycholysis, detaching the actual nail plate from the nail bed. When you put these three things together, it's very characteristic of psoriasis. You oftentimes you can make a diagnosis simply from the nails alone. There's certain sites that are involved that we always take note of when we're evaluating patients. Genitals, of course, have a tremendous psychosocial impact, even if by surface area involvement is not high. Scalp and inverse psoriasis tend to be a little bit more difficult to treat. But I'm working with medical students in the clinic, and they come through our clinic. One of the things that I try to make sure everyone takes away from their rotation is that psoriasis is not just a dermatologic condition. All right, so if somebody comes to me and says psoriasis is skin only, it's just a dermatology disease, that tells me that they lack a fundamental understanding of how psoriasis works. Psoriasis is systemic inflammation. You have system-wide inflammation, and because of that inflammation, there's a number of comorbidities that have been associated with psoriasis. This is actually not even a comprehensive list. There's new ones coming out. I think in the last 6 months, uveitis has also been associated with psoriasis. So these patients have systemic inflammation, and they're at risk for organ involvement in many different ways. It's estimated, these numbers are old, these came out 7 or 8 years ago, but it's estimated that the comorbidities alone, so not psoriasis or its expensive treatments, but the comorbidities alone cost the U.S. over $36 billion annually in healthcare dollars. The most important to note here is psoriatic arthritis. About 1 out of every 3 patients will have some form of psoriatic arthritis. It's a seronegative arthritis that's extremely destructive. So you can see before the age of disease-modifying agents, these patients end up almost crippled from their severe joint deformities. It's important to recognize these early on because we can make a big difference in their disease course by intervening early on. Psoriatic arthritis frequency also goes up as your psoriasis becomes more widespread. Cardiovascular risk is important to note. I bring this up often with patients. The reason is we know psoriasis patients are at higher risk of obesity and metabolic syndrome, but independent of those factors, it's been very crucial that psoriasis patients have a higher risk of myocardial infarction and overall cardiovascular events. This is a good paper published 12 years ago in the Main Journal of the American Medical Association. It shows that severe psoriatics have a higher risk of cardiovascular events compared to mild psoriatics, and that risk is most pronounced at younger ages. So after about the age of 60 or 70, that risk has to normalize. It's important to know this when you're discussing treatment regimens with patients, because someone, even with severe skin disease, may not be bothered by the skin lesions. They should be aware that systemic treatment has been shown to decrease certain risk factors, cardiac risk factors. So there's certain medications that have been shown to modify this actual risk factor. We have to make sure patients are aware before starting a certain medication. Psoriatics are at higher risk for certain cancers. It's not known as skin cancer. It's something that obviously we see in our clinic. But probably the most relevant to us today is lymphoma. Lymphoma, over several different studies, has been pretty convincingly shown that people with psoriasis have higher risk of lymphoma. The actual numbers vary depending on the study and the population that you're looking at. But it's pretty well established that these patients at their baseline have a higher risk of lymphoma compared to the average population. The reason that's important is because in a little bit we'll talk about certain medications and their possible associations with lymphoma. And it's important to remember that sometimes it's difficult to tease apart the medication's effect from the characteristic of the baseline population. Right? So the bulk of today is covering the vast amount of treatments that we have available. We'll talk about kind of the old systemic agents, the newer things that are coming out of the pipeline, and maybe a little bit of a glimpse into what's not yet soon. This is just a little time limit. To me, it's interesting because it shows how far we've come in a very small amount of time. If you look at the last century, incremental process was made every few years. Initially, in the early 1900s, they discovered that X-rays and ultraviolet light may have some beneficial effects in psoriasis. It wasn't until 1925 that Dr. Gethern invented a protocol. He basically found out that tar is photosensitizing, when you combine tar baths with ultraviolet light, you get very effective psoriasis treatment. So this was invented back in 1925. For many, many decades, this was the mainstay of treatment for severe psoriasis. So I trained under dermatologists, just one generation older than me, who, for much of their career, would round the inpatient service and perform this kind of protocol treatment. My generation has never been exposed to it. So it shows me how quickly we become in a very short amount of time. Cyclosporin, again, this is where a paradigm shift occurred when we finally realized that psoriasis is a T-cell mediated disease. But again, we basically see an incremental process for 100 years. And then starting in 2003 is when we kind of entered into our age of biologics and everything kind of started coming out of the pipeline. So we started after the TNF alpha inhibitors in the mid-2000s. Ustekinumab was the first non-TNF alpha inhibitor approved for psoriasis. It's still the only IL-12 and 23 inhibitor on the market for psoriasis. In 2015, we started the age of the IL-17 inhibitors, which took our biologic treatments to a completely different level of effectiveness. And then, of course, we'll talk a little bit about Premalas, which is currently a small molecule for psoriasis. A lot of people have asked me what they can do in terms of over-the-counter treatments for psoriasis. Over-the-counter treatments obviously are never going to be as effective as certain prescriptions and as systemic agents, but hydrocortisone is a good anti-inflammatory mainstay. Probably not going to work as much for most of the body, but in sensitive areas like the genitals and the eyelids, I still think it's a useful treatment. When I recommend hydrocortisone or any kind of steroid to patients, I always make sure to tell them to take at least 1 week off every month to prevent acid. Salicylic acid is a beta-hydroxy acid that works by decreasing corticosteroid adhesion, so it's a good curative way. And oftentimes I'll tell patients to use T-cell shampoo to break up some of the scale of the scalp to make it a little bit more comfortable. I don't use T-gel and cold tar as much. There are some old school dermatologists who still use it. I think there's just better options out there, but it is one of the tools that we can for patients. There's a number of different prescriptions that are non-systemic that we use. Oftentimes we'll inject little times that are use to other agents. We do quite a bit of phototherapy, which I'm not really going to cover today, so I think beyond this talk, but it's a good, safe, anti-inflammatory treatment that really has no major systemic effects. Calcium is still used by some dermatologists with steroid-sparing agent just to prevent having steroids over time. Right? Just a couple basic terms to understand here in interpreting psoriasis medications. The psoriasis area severity index, or PASI, is basically just a score that investigators use to classify psoriasis as severe it is. It's not important to understand really how it's calculated to divide the body up into different areas and scale it based on different features of psoriasis. But I think what's important is to understand what a PASI 75 is. So when these patients are entered into clinical trials, they receive a baseline PASI score. All right? Each patient baseline PASI score is calculated based on their psoriasis prior to the trial. And then at certain time points, they measure how the percent of reduction of that patient's PASI score. So a PASI 75 refers to the number of patients in each trial who achieve a 75% reduction of baseline PASI. It's a good rough marker for how effective a medication is in clearing a patient. So PASI 90 is how many patients reach 90% clearance of psoriasis. And a PASI 100 is a measure of how many patients go from severe psoriasis to complete clearance, not a single skin lesion. Right? For most of clinical trials that we're going to discuss, PASI 75 has just been decided on as being a basic benchmark. That's usually a line where patients tend to be satisfied with treatment and notice positive therapeutic effects. So that's the kind of basic primary outcome that we use. The IGA, the investigator's global assessment, is a little bit simpler. It's just a 5-point scale based on how widespread psoriasis is. And in a lot of these trials, you'll see an IGA of 0 or 1, so clear or almost clear as a primary measure of efficacy. These are the medications we're going to talk about. Some of the more conventional systemics, as well as a new oral molecule, and then of course your biologics. I won't talk about certolizumab or Cimzia as much today because it doesn't yet have psoriasis FDA approval. It is approved for psoriatic arthritis, and we have used it off label. Right? The claim of certolizumab is that it's a pegylated antibody, so it doesn't cross the placenta, unlike other TNF alpha inhibitors in this class. Whether or not it's clinically relevant is a different story, but it is something that differentiates it from other antibodies. Again, there's a lot of, as good as our list is, as good as our toolbox is, there's still more things coming down the pipeline. Tofacitinib is a medicine that's been around for a while. It's approved for RA. It's seeking psoriasis approval. It's shown decent efficacy in psoriasis. We have some more IL-12 and IL-23 inhibitors coming down the line with risankizumab and tofacitinib. And Miliband is the first inhibitor of the colony-stimulating factor to seek psoriasis approval. So still more things coming down the pipeline. So just briefly on a couple of the basic systemic agents that we used to use before biologics that we continue to use in certain patients. Methotrexate is just a basic medication in dermatology. We use it for a wide variety of inflammatory conditions. populations. It was discovered to work for psoriasis in the 1950s, but it took about 20 years to get approved by the FDA. The way it works is chemically, it's very similar to folic acid, which is an amine group here, so we have an aryl group, and a methyl group instead of a hydrogen. So it's a pegylated dihydrofolic inductase. That's a primary mechanism that I think everyone knows about. We've also discovered that methotrexate has potent anti-inflammatory properties as a result of its ability to increase endogenous adenosine. It does so by inhibiting this ACAR enzyme, which allows the intracellular adenosine to build up and activate several anti-inflammatory pathways. And we believe, at least in dermatology, that most of the anti-inflammatory effects that we see with methotrexate probably come from the second mechanism of action. It does have immunosuppressive effects, of course, because of its ability to affect purine synthesis. It's dosed weekly. Once in a while, you get elderly patients who are confused and take it daily, and that's when you tend to run into the disastrous side effects of methotrexate. Usually, we start out with the oral form. Once in a while, we'll go to subcutaneous methotrexate. I reserve that for patients who show a modest response to the oral methotrexate, whereas I think they may get a little bit of a better response with increased bioavailability, or patients who are doing well but just have intolerable GI adverse effects, so we bypass the GI system. 15 milligrams a week is a standard starting dose. Some doctors do test doses. I tend not to. I think 15 milligrams a week as a first dose is an appropriate initial dose. We typically go to a max of about 25 a week. We do give concurrent folic acid at UConn. It's a standard of practice, I think, across most dermatology and rheumatology practices. It is a little bit controversial if you look at the actual evidence. It's mostly extrapolated from the RA population, but there is some evidence that giving folic acid at the same time decreases your risk of hepatotoxicity and GI side effects. Whether or not it affects pancytopenia, so the evidence there is a little bit more lacking. I do tell patients to be patient with it. A lot of patients notice benefit within the first 4 weeks, but their full therapeutic benefit is 2 to 3 months out. In general, we think of methotrexate as being a PASI 75-40%. That's the general ballpark that dermatologists kind of how dermatologists do methotrexate. There are trials where the PASI 75 is higher, depending on whether or not it's given subcutaneously. Of course, methotrexate in the old guidelines was practicing category X. Absolutely contraindicated. I tend to not. I don't like using it in women of childbearing age unless they're very, very responsible with birth because the effects of this can be disastrous, and because we have so many better options. In terms of drug interactions, you guys know this better than me. There's a number of different interactions to be aware of methotrexate. There was a good review in 2010 that showed the most common interactions with methotrexate and the NSAIDs and so on. In terms of the safety profile, the most common thing that we see by far is an upset stomach and headaches that are clinic. It's usually within the realm of being tolerable. Patients usually stay on medications. It is a hepatotoxic, and that is dose dependent. So if you look at the old 2009 ACR criteria, they used to recommend liver biopsies after about 3.5 to 4 grams of cumulative methotrexate. Some doctors were even more conservative. We're phasing out of that. I think there's very few dermatologists and rheumatologists still recommending liver biopsies. There's better non-invasive ways of detecting fibrosis without the same potential adverse effects. Every patient wants to know if they can drink when they're on methotrexate. Every doctor, I think, has their own kind of threshold for how tolerant they are. There's been studies at the UK that show anywhere upwards of 12 to 16 minutes of alcohol may increase your risk for hepatotoxicity on methotrexate. So anyone drinks more than 4 or 5 drinks a week, they tend to steer clear of methotrexate. Pulmonary fibrosis is extremely rare in the psoriasis population. Tends to occur early on. We usually see that more with the RA patients. Pancytopenia is the one side effect of methotrexate that we tend to worry about. Thankfully, it's exceedingly rare. It is idiosyncratic. I have not seen that in my practice. It's exceedingly rare, but it's something that we talk to patients about. The doses that we, the dermatologists and rheumatologists use methotrexate, there is no major renal toxicity as we've seen with the oncologic doses. However, if their granted clearance is less than 50, we tend to have the dose of methotrexate. Acitretin is the only retinoid that I'm going to talk about. I think it's the only one that's important for psoriasis, although we do use the other ones in dermatology. It's a second generation retinoid that's a vitamin A derivative, affects the RNR and RXR nuclear receptors. Like all retinoids, we tell patients to take with food to increased bioavailability. We don't use this in limited calorie age at all. There's some evidence that although acetretin is hydrophilic, the ingestion of alcohol can cause a reverse metabolism or a reesterification of acetretin into tretinoin, which is more lipophilic and can hang around in the adipocytes for an extended period of time. So for that reason, right now, the guidelines in the U.S. Are that patients should not become pregnant with pregnancy within 3 years of using acetretin, which is why we don't use it in that general range. It's hepatically metabolized with a half-life of about 50 hours. In general, it has about the same efficacy as methotrexate in terms of the PASI score. With that said, it's not as good at decreasing body surface area, which is why we tend to not use it as much. The niche for acetretin, I think, that still exists is I think it works a little bit better for pustular forms of psoriasis, especially when it's combined with phototherapy for pustular psoriasis on the hands and feet. The other niche is it's not immunosuppressive, unlike every other medication that we're going to talk about, almost every other system that we're going to talk about today. So once in a while, we have an inpatient consult with a patient who has an active malignancy or is quite ill. We'll go to acetretin as a primary modality. I tend to start with 25 milligrams a day as an initial dose and titrate up to 50 per day. The side effects of acetretin are the primary reason it's not used more. We worry about the lipids and the teratogenicity, but in reality, I think patients, in my experience, don't like it. My allergies or problems are significant. Women think the hair loss is more pronounced in the female population. Patients can get cirrhosis, cheilitis, sticky skin sensation. So in general, it's not a well-tolerated medication. I think there's better alternatives out there. The primary drug interactions to be aware of with cyclosporin and progesterone contraceptives. Cyclosporin is still one of my favorite drugs to use for psoriasis because it has its own special niche. It's the fastest acting medication available for psoriasis. Only the modified form of the oral is FDA approved for psoriasis, theoretically more bioavailability. There's different mechanisms of action, just for the sake of simplicity. We'll just call it a calcineurin inhibitor. It works to decrease IL-2 through that mechanism and affects the T cell population. Gives you an excellent PASI 75 or 70-80%, so different level of efficacy than your methotrexate or your acetretin. But where it really comes into play is when you need fast control. So I think the niche for cyclosporin nowadays is when you have these sick or liver-driven patients, you need to get them under control within a week or two, not 1 to 2 months out. The way we'll use this is we'll tend to use it in combination with other agents more as a bridge. So because of the nephrotoxicity of cyclosporin, we don't like to use it for more than 1 or 2 years. In my clinic, I try to get patients off of it within 6 months. So if I have a patient that's a liver-driven and severe, we'll start the cyclosporin for acute control and start the process typically for a biologic or another systemic at the same time and titrate them off. We do have to taper off cyclosporin because psoriasis can get a pretty nasty rebound if they're cut off cold turkey. The dosing-wise, I will start at 4 milligrams per milligram divided into 2 daily doses, but there is a range. In terms of our side effects that you have to talk to patients about, the GI side effects are the most common, and the nephrotoxicity, of course, is something that we keep an eye on. It's due to the vasoconstriction of the afferent arteriole. Incidentally, that's why cyclosporin is used safely in the pediatric population because they are less prone to getting that vasoconstriction of the afferent arteriole compared to the population. It can cause spikes in blood pressure, so I make sure all my patients are keeping blood pressure while I get home. Paresthesias and hypertrichosis are temporary. They go away when you come off the medication, but it's a major source of annoyance for female patients. The risk of non-melanoma skin cancer is elevated with cyclosporin as best as we can tell. We have to keep a close eye on the patient's lives. But with that said, it's still the fastest acting medication that we have. I think sometimes people reach for prednisone as a quick fix, but it's not a long-term approach. The cyclosporin is a safer way to bring someone to a longer-term care. So we'll get into the biologics a little bit. We talked earlier about TNF-alpha, and we simplified it a little bit. TNF-alpha doesn't just work for the Th1 pathways. It's a very broad-acting molecule that affects dendritic cells, keratinocytes, probably even plays a role in metabolic dysregulation. Right? So it's a broad-acting agent. And so when we talk about our TNF-alpha inhibitors, they're probably a little bit more immunosuppressive, a little bit more broader-acting, but are more selective biologics that we get to. These are the first biologics on the scene for psoriasis: etanercept, adalimumab, infliximab, and Humira, Remicade. The claim to fame here of Remicade and infliximab is that it's the only biologic that we have for psoriasis right now that's given IV, so it's an infusion. It's extremely effective, but we still keep it in our back pocket. It's not a first-line agent because of the inconvenience for patients and because of the increased risk for infusion reactions. I'm not going to go through the dosing. I think this is something that anyone can look up or already knows. But the one thing I want to point out is that for many years, etanercept was the only psoriasis biologic out there that was approved in the pediatric population. So when we need a biologic, anyone under 18, etanercept for many years was the only one that we had to choose. The other thing to note is that infliximab is the only biologic out there that's truly weight-based dosing. All right, we'll talk about ustekinumab. It's got a couple different doses based on weight, but this is really the only medication that's truly based on the exact kilogram of body weight. So our clinical experience, we'll get sometimes from these patients who just don't respond to several biologics in a row. Usually when we put them on infliximab at their appropriate dose based on their body weight, they tend to clear very quickly. So that's one place clinically where we find infliximab to be very useful. In terms of PASI scores, etanercept was the first on the scene. It is the weakest of the biologics for skin. Rheumatologists love it because it works very well for the joints. PASI has roughly 50%. Some studies put out a little bit higher, but as a general rule, we typically as half the patients reaching PASI 75. Right? Adalimumab, in my estimation, is probably the most widely used. This is probably the most widely used biologic in psoriasis today, which is better PASI 75 to about 70%. Then infliximab, of course, the efficacy is fantastic, but because of the method of administration, we tend to use it as a last resort. Just a comparison of how our TNF-alpha inhibitors stack up to our mainstay treatment for many years. The TNF-alpha inhibitors, I think, the safety profile is something that people always want to talk about. The most common thing we see by far are mild infections, upper respiratory tract viral illnesses. The risk for serious infections and TB and hepatitis reactivation is there. So we do all of these tests at baseline when we start a patient on this biologics. We do real quantiferons in every biologic. In all honesty, it's probably been extrapolated from the TNF-alpha inhibitors. There's no good evidence that the other biologics need that yearly quantiferon screen. But a lot of the insurance companies have adopted it, so it's become standard practice. There's good evidence that TNF-alpha inhibitors can worsen and exacerbate demyelinating conditions like multiple sclerosis, Guillain-Barré syndrome, so we always screen for a family history or personal history of a demyelinating condition. For a while, we thought the CHF risk was more than infliximab because there was an infusion, but there is data to suggest that etanercept may trigger CHF as well. It's not an absolute contraindication, but if patients are at higher grade heart failure or are symptomatic, we tend to avoid TNF-alpha. The lymphoma risk is the one that people want to talk about the most because when patients are seeing the commercials and they're rattling off 1,000 side effects, it's always the lymphoma that catches people's attention and what patients want to talk about. And the evidence for it is controversial. There's a couple of good population studies out of Europe that show a slightly increased lymphoma signal. But the thing to remember also is that these patients have a higher lymphoma risk at baseline, and it's sometimes difficult to tease out what's truly due to the medication or what's due to the inherent characteristics of the population. So the way we tend to approach it is I don't think there's any definitive evidence that the lymphoma risk has increased. When we sit patients down, we're having a discussion about the state of the evidence today. And we allow them to make their own decision when we go through different treatment options. Ustekinumab is personally one of my favorites to use for psoriasis. I feel like it's, in general, it's one of the quieter, safer biologics that we use. Most people tend to tolerate this very, very well. We can fall into increased share with P40 subunit, so ustekinumab or Stelara binds to both of these inhibits both of these molecules. It was approved in 2009, and it's, the big news with Stelara is that etanercept for many years was our only pediatric biologic. Late last year, ustekinumab got approval for the adolescent 12 to 17 age group. So we do have two approved biologics for that particular age group. Comes in two doses. The dividing line is whether you're above or below 100 kgs in weight. The maintenance phase is every 12 weeks. And in all honesty, it's probably a little, the frequency is a little too far out. What we've seen clinically is a lot of patients clear on Stelara and then tend to flare in 3 or 4 weeks before their next dose. And so oftentimes when we can get insurance to cover it, we will try to increase the frequency to every 10 weeks or every 8 weeks. And most patients patients do fairly well with that increase in frequency. If you look at the phase 3 trials, the Phoenix trials that 4 years ago, there are several different arms, 2 different doses, both of which are FDA approved, and a 12-week placebo comparator that was then at week 12 re-randomized to one of the 2 different doses. There was a randomized withdrawal phase where they re-randomized patients to placebo and then retreated to see if patients taken off the medication could recapture their effect. If you look at efficacy, we'll just zoom in to one endpoint, look at PASI 75. The purple line represents the higher 90 milligram dose, the blue your lower 45 milligram dose, and your orange here is a placebo. So what you see is not only do you have an excellent PASI 75 score, slightly better than the higher dose, but when patients on placebo were put on the treatment, they very quickly got up to the same level of treatment. So overall, that's an extremely effective drug. The PASI 75 is more than 70-80% range. Its safety profile is also excellent. There's really no major serious adverse effects that we see in general with that. There's no malignancy signal and no major cardiovascular events. And so oftentimes when patients have a history of hepatitis, either if it's treated or certain things that tend to catch your eye in terms of a complicated medical history, many dermatologists feel that leukopenia is one of the safer biologics to use in those patients. Right? The IL-17s started in 2015 with Celgene, and they really took psoriasis treatments to a completely different level in terms of efficacy. We have 2 biologics, Celgene and that directly target the interleukin-17A ligand. There is one from either brodalumab, which directly targets the interleukin-17 receptor. This is a little bit more broader action because the interleukin-17 has many different isoforms. Interleukin-17A can bind to this receptor. So slightly broader effects, slightly different safety profile. We'll get to it in a minute. The thing to remember with IL-17 and class-specific takeaways here, so IL-17 is an important defense mechanism against yeast infections. And so these patients do get increased rates of candidiasis, not life-threatening. Typically things that patients frequently stay on medication for. But you do see increased candidiasis in these patients, and we do worry about it. And throughout most of the trials and even post-marketing surveillance, we see an increased signal for inflammatory bowel disease. So we always screen patients for family history. Patients are being worked up for any kind of GI symptoms, especially at a certain age group. We tend to steer clear of IL-17. This drug is, like I said, takes a completely different level of efficacy. This was a phase 3 clinical trial for Celgene, which was the first to hit the market. They looked at 2 different doses, 300 and 150 milligrams. 300 is the current FDA-approved dose. Different endpoints shown here. So this is the IGA 0, 1, and then different PASI scores, 75, and 90, and 100. I'll select one just to kind of illustrate a basic point. These medications are taking the PASI 75 to completely different levels. You're looking at PASI 75 scores of upwards of 80%. There was a pretty significant difference between the 300 and the 150 dose. And the second trial, they used etanercept as an active comparator. The lower dose was better, but not loads better than etanercept. 300 milligram dose blows out of the water, so that's the current FDA-approved dose. Unfortunately, it only comes in a 150 milligram pre-filled syringe. So patients tend to not like having to inject themselves twice every single time they take the medication. But it's a small price to pay because the effects are usually, the therapeutic effects are significant. Again, adverse effect profile, the candida infections, there's a small neutropenia signal in some of these patients, but not enough to where checking the CDC has become standard of practice. Mild infections, the candidiasis being the most common. But overall, the adverse effects were not increased compared to the active comparator of etanercept. Ixekizumab is Taltz, reaching even higher PASI 75 based on the clinical trials. With that said, each clinical trial has its own study population, so we tend to often use PASI 75 as a benchmark. If we're being correct, we shouldn't be comparing drugs against each other unless they can compare in a direct head-to-head trial. Ixekizumab has, the way it's dosed is there's an induction phase for the first 12 weeks, so it's given every 2 weeks, and then they enter a monthly maintenance phase. The Uncover phase 3 trials were designed with an active comparator, again, of etanercept. This is the induction phase, so the first 3 months of therapy. They looked at 2 different dosing schedules, monthly versus the approved every 2 weeks, and then maintenance phase. When we look at the overall results, again, high PASI 75, so that's your main takeaway, even more effective than ustekinumab. This is the FDA-approved dose, and what it shows is just a number of different efficacy endpoints. What you'll see is that even out to 60 weeks, so not only are these drugs reaching new levels of PASI 75s, they're maintaining the responses more than a year out. I think it's important to know into consultations on the vast majority of patients, if they stay on treatment uninterrupted, maintain their treatment for the long term, at least out to 60 weeks. All right, so ixekizumab has similar side effects to secukinumab. The difference is tolerance tends to be a little bit more reactive. Patients get a little bit more injection site reactions, pain with the injections than with Cosentyx or secukinumab. But otherwise, the safety profile is overall quite similar. I think the two medications is interchangeable in many ways. Oftentimes it comes down to the formulary and what insurance will cover when we make the decision. Brodalumab is the IL-17. It's a little bit different because it hits the receptor and not the ligand. It is slightly more effective, or I should say, it reached even higher PASI 75 scores in its phase 3 trials. It comes with a 210 milligram single dose vial. You start out taking it weekly for 3 weeks, and then every 2 weeks for the long term. In its phase 3 trials, this was the first medication to use ustekinumab as an active comparator. So typically what you see is people take the oldest biologic, etanercept, also typically the lowest PASI 75 scores as a comparator. But now we're getting into drugs that are so effective, they're starting to use other very effective medications like ustekinumab as their active comparator. And so in the trials, the FDA-approved dose is this, the 210 is this green line right here, and the orange represents the MAR. The other thing to note here is we're no longer looking at PASI 75s. These drugs are so effective, they've essentially changed the game on how we interpret clinical trials. So now PASI 90 has become our new benchmark, our new standard of treatment. You can see that the higher FDA-approved dose takes ustekinumab, which again is a very effective medication for psoriasis, and now performs it at every time point, even out to 3 months. The safety profile of brodalumab is a little bit different. It's similar in the infectious categories, but across about 9,400 patient years of data within the phase 3 trials, there were 4 completed suicides in the brodalumab study. And so the FDA did place a suicide warning label on brodalumab. Patients have to undergo a risk management program and sign a waiver before they go on the medication. And a lot of patients ask whether or not this is truly due to the medication or not. If you remember back with Accutane or isotretinoin 20 years ago, it's kind of in a similar place. Over the last 20 years, there's been very big scientific studies that essentially debunk its connections with depression and suicide. So I think with brodalumab, it's a little bit early to tell because phase 3 trials typically are underpowered to pick up rare adverse events like suicide. Again, we're talking 4 across 9,000 patient years. The other problem is, again, psoriasis patients have a higher risk of psychosocial issues at baseline. So suicides have been seen before in other clinical trials, but they were fleeting, few and far between, and usually in the placebo groups, not in the active groups. So this is new. We haven't seen anything quite like this in the other trials, but I think whether or not this is a circumstance of the patient population or an actually adhere to the medication itself, is something that we're going to see over the next 4 or 5 years. But I think the data is a little premature to reach any firm conclusions. We do talk to patients about this. We make sure to screen with people with a personal working history of depression before we put patients on this medication. But again, very high levels of efficacy. Finally, the most recent biologic with the market is guselkumab. It's the first of these selective IL-12/23s. So earlier we talked about Stelara, both IL-12 and 23. So IL-23 is probably the only interleukin that's actually important in psoriasis. IL-12 is more just a bystander. So for the last few years, companies have been trying to form this selective IL-23 by just targeting G19. Guselkumab is the first one to enter the market. It's a fully human antibody. In the Voyage phase 3 trials, they use again another heavyweight, heavier than that as an active comparator. For the sake of time, I'll just synthesize the data. at even just 4 months out and at 48 weeks out, we're still looking at outperformed Humira for head of neck by every single efficacy measure. Really blew it out of the water. If you're looking at the PASI hundreds, what you'll see is within 4 months of starting therapy, we're talking severe psoriasis, people with severe psoriasis enrolled in these trials. 37%, more than 1 in 3 patients were completely clear 4 months into the medication. And not only was that response maintained 1 year after, it actually improved. Almost half the patients on busulfan were cleared 48 weeks after starting the medication. So again, we're reaching completely new levels of efficacy. I think selective IL-23 inhibitors and IL-17 inhibitors are by far our most efficacious medications. Whether or not they're appropriate for a patient depends on the individual circumstance. And then just briefly, I'll cover Premolast. This is Otezla. It was approved about 40 years ago in 2014. Still the only small molecule approved for psoriasis. It's a phosphodiesterase 4 inhibitor. Works for decreasing apathy. It's a 30 milligram BID dosing. It's an oral medication. In the clinical trials, the PASI 75 that was reached was about 33%. So not even in the same league as the biologic agents that we're talking about. The advantage is that it doesn't need lab monitoring. Patients don't need to inject themselves. And so some patients associate injections with more side effects or injections with a more heavy-duty medication. Those are the patients that typically come in and request this medication. It's not side effect free. We do see a decent amount of GI symptoms and the result as patients stay on the medication. Weight loss is seen independent of the GI symptoms. There are a few mood changes that we always screen for. You do have to cut the dose in half if the creatinine clearance is less than 30. But the big takeaway from my perspective, having treated many psoriasis patients, is it's tough to see an actual niche for Premolast. I think our biologics are so effective in comparison. We're talking about 1 out of 3 patients reaching the old benchmark. You're talking about a medication that is probably equally or a little bit less effective than methotrexate. But when you look at cost, these are old numbers from 2013. The cost of Otezla is several fold, talking in the thousands, compared to only for $60 a month. So you added lower efficacy compared to biologics. That cost in the healthcare system is sometimes hard to see a niche. I have a couple of patients on Otezla, and they seem to do okay with it, but in general, it's not a medication that I think is used widely. So to wrap up, I just wanted to conclude with just an idea of how we approach these patients in our clinic. The first thing, obviously, is you have to establish a diagnosis of psoriasis. So this right here looks like psoriasis. It's big, it's scaly, it's thick. This is actually cutaneous T-cell lymphoma. And so lymphoma in the skin often mimics psoriasis and other scaly conditions. So I tell all patients, please go see your dermatologist at least once to establish a diagnosis and, if necessary, perform a skin biopsy. Once a diagnosis is clear, we classify the patients based on their severity and based on their comorbidity. So if there's psoriatic arthritis, we tend to use more TNF-alpha inhibitors and IL-17 inhibitors over some of the other biologics. We look at other risk factors, so if they're big drinkers, renal impairment, family history of multiple sclerosis. These are all things that go into our decision-making process when we select treatment. And oftentimes there's multiple right answers, and we have a selection of what the patient chooses. Finally, just to wrap up, I made a kind of a summary slide showing the basic PASI scores. Again, your big takeaways here in terms of efficacy, nothing really touches selective IL-23 trials and routines. Infliximab is still a great medication for obese patients not responding to other biologics. And then there's still a place for some of the older medications, methotrexate and acetretin in certain scenarios. Biopearls, just remember when patients are immunosuppressed, we should avoid live vaccines. Any of the biologics, the IDSA recommends anything over 0.4 mg per case of methotrexate is considered immunosuppression. So flu shot is fine with the nasal vaccine, not as much. With the flu shingles vaccine coming down the pipeline, it will be a moot point because it will not be a live vaccine. But we try to counsel patients and PCPs to avoid live vaccines and contact medications. We still do yearly monitoring and screening in labs depending on which is finally, I'd like to thank my chairman, Dr. Strober, for imparting many years of psoriasis wisdom and knowledge on me, and Dr. St. for over our hospital for connecting me with your group and giving me the chance. Thank you.